Eric, thank you so much for joining us today on Conversations with Leaders.
It's great to be here, Clark. Thank you.
So, if you'd be so kind, could you share a little bit about your background, how you came to AWS, and what your current role is?
Sure. My title is Vice President and Distinguished Engineer. I'm currently the Senior Security Engineer at Amazon Web Services. I report to our Chief Information Security Officer. Quite a while ago, I wound up with a job doing backbone security for UUNet, which was the largest internet service provider at the time. After working at UUNet for a few years, I wound up working at the FBI, and that was a fascinating experience. I had to deal with security on a whole different level there. And one of the things that we did in this part of the FBI was we had a large network of untasked resources. Our mission was very tactical. There were things that would go bump in the night, and we would have to respond to them. And I built this network using all of the technologies that AWS doesn't use, a giant storage area network, a SAN, and huge Sun servers, and massive disk arrays, and things like that. And we were watching AWS from the outside, and it was exactly what we needed. And so we reached out initially through Jeff Barr, and wound up talking with a bunch of the leaders at AWS. And we were like, look, we need this, build this for the government. And over the course of a couple months, the conversation shifted from build this for the government to why don't you come here and work on this and build this for the government.
Oh, wow.
And so that's how a group of us wound up flying out to Seattle, interviewing for jobs at Amazon.
So, Distinguished Engineer. It's not a common title that we have throughout our customer base. Could you talk a little bit more about what, in fact, is a distinguished engineer and what some of your responsibilities are at AWS in that capacity?
Sure. So as you climb the levels at Amazon as an engineer, you become a principal engineer. And that's a big deal. Principal engineers are incredibly respected across the company. And that's one of the things that I love about working at Amazon. We have an individual contributor ladder and a management ladder. And there's no difference between the two. You can be incredibly respected and effective and influential as either of those roles. And in fact, some of the people that I enjoy working with the most have moved back and forth between management and individual contributorship in the course of their careers. And so distinguished engineer is just the level on the individual contributor ladder that is parallel with vice president on the management ladder. And so the distinguished engineers are the most senior engineers across the company. And we are expected to have a very broad view across not just our organization, but broadly across potentially even the entire company, and to make sure that we're working on the most important things and helping out customers as much as we can.
So, while in fact you are as part of the AWS security organization, you can contribute to other efforts throughout AWS.
It's not just that I can contribute, it's that I'm expected to contribute. And it's beyond AWS. And so I have been able to meet with people from across the company. Most recently, I've been doing a lot of work with the payments security team. And it's fascinating. It's a domain that I'm all but ignorant of. And so I understand the security fundamentals. I understand AWS and how to run an AWS securely, but I know almost nothing about payments. And so I was able to help them with their deployments, but they were able to teach me a tremendous amount.
That's just awesome. We have a very strong engineering culture at AWS and Amazon. And one of the programs that I've been fascinated about is the Inventor program and the Patent program. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So patenting is the process of formally, legally protecting your intellectual property, your IP. And I've never participated in any intellectual property programs outside of Amazon, but I found Amazon's to be incredibly well run on behalf of the inventors. So at Amazon, if you have an idea, if you have something where you've hit that bar, you have that kernel of novelty that you can explain to one of ordinary skill in the art, you file what's called an invention disclosure form. And this is a super easy form. You should not write a book for this. It's on a website internally that's run by our IP legal department. You fill this out. You have a disclosure meeting with the inside counsel and the outside counsel, and you talk about your invention and various embellishments to it, embodiments of it, and enough that the patent attorneys can go back and write the actual patent up. And then 4 or 6 weeks later, you have another meeting with the exact same people where you review the diagrams and the claims and the teaching specification of that patent. And so the burden on our staff to file an invention disclosure and eventually a patent is about as low as I think it could possibly be. And it's geared very much towards enabling them to continue with their engineering job and not spend time on the patenting process.
So I would imagine all of the developers that work at AWS Security don't necessarily start off with a strong security engineering background. What kind of mechanisms do you have in place to get those developers up to the bar that you set for AWS Security, especially in sort of the builder tools or even perhaps customer-facing security products?
Well, there's a couple of ways to think about that question. On the one hand, security at Amazon is a builder's discipline. We can't do all of the things that we need to do. We cannot scale with the business if we're doing so solely by adding engineers to the team. And so a tremendous amount of what we do is building tools. It's straight up software development, just like you would do on any other team anywhere in Amazon, except you're building security tooling. And so many of our engineers are not security engineers. They don't have a security background. They don't need to have any particular security expertise to join the team. Some of them have a passion for security. Some of them just like the job and the team that they're working on, and they're very happy doing what they're doing, but they don't have a particular interest in security, and that's fine. The whole realm of security is in figuring out what assumptions some builder made, and then figuring out how to violate those assumptions to push the system into an unexpected state. What happens when I jam a whole hard drive's worth of data into this field? What happens when I turn the dial up to 11? What happens when I put a negative number in this field? And the people that think like that tend, in my experience, to inherently think like that. And it's really hard to teach that mentality. And so when we find someone with that mentality, all of the specific security knowledge can be taught. All of the day-to-day technologies, we can ramp people up on them very easily. None of the things that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis now existed when I was in college. And so the fundamentals that I learned in college still apply, but none of the specific technologies do. And so we actually have a really robust program for ramping people up that have that particular security bent. So the answer to your question is twofold. There's a set of people where we don't need to ramp them up on security.
Right.
It's a standard development job, it's a standard builder role, and they excel. And some of them do express an interest in security, and that's great. We encourage that, but it's not necessary. And then on the other side, we find the people that are inclined to figure out, how do I break things? And asking how do I break things leads naturally to, and how do I fix them so they can't be broken again? And all of the job-specific skills there, we can teach people.
So to that point, or I guess the reverse of that point, many of our customers, as they are trying to build out a security expertise throughout their own development communities, one of the tracks that they take is they'll take a security expert and put them with a quote unquote regular development team to help build up the security bar within that team, and basically have a sort of security champion mindset. So the idea is we have a finite amount of security professionals, so we try to spread them out through the development teams, and eventually sort of all boats rise. Is that something similar at AWS and Amazon, how we look at things, or is, since security is sort of built into our ethos, that everybody realizes I have that certain responsibility for security for my application, and therefore I'm going to follow the process? Could you talk a little bit how that might work?
Security is job zero. We fundamentally believe that just like scalability, availability, low latency, low jitter, security is part of the customer experience. It is a part of everything that we build. That said, security expertise is uncommon. We don't have nearly as many security engineers as we wish we had. I mean, I would love it if every single developer that we had were also a security expert. I'm not holding my breath. And so I think it's interesting that you use the term security champion, because that is literally the name of the program that we have internally, where we find security-minded people embedded within the service teams, And we have training for them and we have support for them to raise their security skills so that they can help influence across their service team. And then when a big decision happens, they don't have to take the lonely position and say, I, as the sole security champion here, feel that this isn't ready for launch or that we need to do this extra work. There's this whole security organization that they can draw on, and we can work together from a position of customer obsession to figure out what is the right thing for customers. If we ship an insecure service, that's the wrong result for customers. But if we don't ship the service, like a service that doesn't exist delights zero customers. And so we have to strike the right balance. And by having security expertise embedded within the service team, deeply sympathetic to the service team, and then security expertise in the AWS security team, still sympathetic to the service team, but acting as more of an auditor role, we make much better decisions and we make them much more quickly.
And I would imagine that alleviates, again, many customer conversations that I have. The security department is looked at as the department of no, or it's the department I need to avoid in order to get my application launched. With this model that you just talked about, it seems that that bridge of trust is extended and everybody kind of realizes, well, security is just part of the job and this is how we do things at Amazon in our case. And then the end result is a more secure product that comes out the door.
So a while ago, we were trying to come up with a mission statement. Like how do you say, what does AWS security do? And the best that we came up with was ship securely. It's 2 words, and I think it does a great job of capturing why we exist. The company doesn't exist to do security. It's called Amazon Web Services. It's not called Amazon Security. And so we're here to ship these web services, to deliver for customers. If we don't ship, we are not executing. We are not doing what the business is here to do. And so we are here to enable the business. We are not the reason for the business. And you can't have this business if you don't have exemplary security, but we're just one facet of the business. And the most important thing for us is the executive sponsorship that we get. Clearly, security is incredibly important, and that rolls down from above. And so because we're not saying, we're the security team, you have to listen to us, please pay attention, I don't have that problem. From the CEO on down, the tone has been set. Everyone knows that security is important.
So measurement of a security program, specifically with developers and others that are writing code within AWS, what are some key metrics that you use to measure the efficacy of the security program throughout the development community in AWS?
We have 2 places that we apply metrics. You don't want to measure time to close the ticket. The ticket takes as long to close as the ticket takes to close. But the things that we do measure are our responsiveness. So we have SLAs on first engagement. For example, if you email aws-security@amazon.com, we've publicly stated you will get a response from a human in 24 hours. And we measure that. We actually have graphs and charts that I look at every week showing, this is how long it took us to get back to the people that are emailing us. And so responsiveness really matters. 1, because if you're not responsive, you lose trust with people. And 2, because if you are responsive, it tends to mean that other good things are happening. Another place that we apply similar thinking is in ticket staleness. Everything is a ticket. And so we have a ton of automation built into the ticketing system to make sure that if a ticket goes stale, and we measure both the amount of time between correspondence from the service team and the amount of time between correspondence from the security team. And so we know when tickets are languishing, we know when we're blocked on the service team or the service team is blocked on us, and we can very quickly surface the tickets that need immediate attention. But that also gives us the data to go and introspect and retrospect and figure out which of our processes aren't working, where we need to change staffing, where we need to invest in better tooling. And so we measure the processes around security, and we found that actually drives the right security outcomes. The other thing that we measure aggressively, it's not about getting it right. We spend a tremendous amount of time in application security to design a good service, but Amazon never launches anything and leaves it alone. We're constantly adding features. We're constantly responding to customer feedback. And our services change rapidly based on that feedback. And so our goal is not to launch securely. It is to keep it secure through the life of the service. And that means that the things that you do during the initial application security review quickly age and lose their value. And so part of the application security process is determining which invariants, which statements we always want to be true about the service, and then figuring out how we're going to verify those invariants in code. And so if a service should always deny a request that's formatted this way, there should be a canary that's calling that service live in production with that particularly formatted request and making sure that it gets denied. And then we measure our canaries. How much of the surface area of the service are they covering? How often are they running? How often are they failing? How often are they getting anomalous results? And we measure those processes, validating our security stance. It's not measuring the delivered security. Right. That's hard to measure, but it's measuring regressions in the security bar that we've already established. And that is incredibly important because there's always going to be another security issue. Our teams are innovative. They keep coming up with new and exciting services that we haven't had to secure before. It's another one of the things that keeps me coming to work every day.
That's fantastic. So in a related question, but from a customer perspective, we have customers that are very, very advanced. They're doing infrastructure as code through a CI/CD pipeline into production. On the other end, we have customers who are solely in the console doing sort of point and click activities. And I would, just from my experience, the majority of our customers are somewhere in the middle trying to get to that infrastructure as code, quote unquote, nirvana. What advice would you give to customer leadership to really encourage more of a focus on engineering versus the sort of operational point and click aspects of running an infrastructure?
So I have never built anything beautiful. I have built things that I'm incredibly proud of, things that have done very well in the marketplace, whether it's the public marketplace of AWS services or the internal marketplace where our customers are our service teams and other Amazonians. But they are all systems that started off with a kernel of an idea, and we built what we thought was the smallest thing we could build that would delight customers. And then we iterated as quickly as we could, and they grew over time. And it's that iteration that gets you the magnificent tools. And the people that are close to them think of them as Frankenstein's monster. It's that piece of garbage, like it's all baling wire and duct tape, looks like MacGyver built it. Right. But the reality is they're magnificent tools. They're stunningly effective. And because they were built for the job they're doing, incrementally, step by step, they actually do the job that they need to do. And so when someone comes in, whether they're joining the team or whether we're talking to a customer about how we do things internally, they see this array of tooling that we have, all of these mechanisms that we built, and it's overwhelming. It seems like there's no way I could replicate that. One, you don't need to replicate it. This is to handle our specific security issues. But two, we didn't build these things. We grew them over time, and all of them started small. And so it's that incremental approach. When we were just talking about metrics, I talked about no regressions, about not having to solve the same problem twice. Right. So get better every day. Every day you incrementally raise the security bar, and exponential growth kicks in.
So for the customers that are viewing this, the idea is to essentially start small with your engineering efforts and then just grow over time and make them better and better and better versus I need to change my approach to everything all at once.
Absolutely. That incremental mindset always pays dividends. And it has to be married on the other side by security professionals that are not Chicken Little. We are all surrounded by risk every day. Crossing the street is a risk, driving your car is a risk, plugging your laptop into the network is a risk. Right. And so we have to become comfortable with taking appropriate risks. And so security is the art, and I wish it were more of a science, but I think it is an art, of managing those risks, of understanding which risks are acceptable, which risks can be mitigated, and which risks are flat out unacceptable. And so as a security professional, in any role, anywhere in security, you have to be able to talk about how serious this risk is. And when in the security organization, when talking about security, a phrase we use all the time is clinical and precise. If you say this is the worst security vulnerability ever, and like there's nothing we can do to fix it, you just lost a tremendous amount of credibility. You've closed off all areas of discussion. We're no longer negotiating on the path forward. You've just shut it down. If instead you say, this is a really concerning issue, I am worried about this specific impact. Here's 3 possible paths forward. I like the first one. It's more expensive, but it also provides this benefit. Right. Let's talk about what we need to do here. It's clinical, it's precise, and it opens the conversation. I'm bringing you my expertise so we can have a conversation about the business. And so the engineer that's building this security tooling needs to have that in mind. They need to be thinking, how am I making the business better? Not, oh my gosh, everything is on fire and it's all terrible.
So another common question I get from our customer CISOs is, what's the right information and what level of information should I be reporting to my board or senior leadership team on the efficacy of my security program? Could you share a little bit about how that works at AWS?
Well, before we answer that, one of the things that I think that's very important about the way we've structured security at AWS, I think that organizational reporting structure where the security team is not buried far down in the organizational chart, but is right there at the table, is incredibly important because that sets the stage for the conversation about how is the security team doing. And it's not just how is the security team doing, it is how is the security team and the service teams doing to deliver on our promises to the business. We have basically 2 different kinds of conversations with Adam. The first is we regularly discuss the most important security issues with him. This is a meeting that happens weekly. It is a huge investment of his time. We're very honored to have it, but it's one of the most effective mechanisms that we have. And it means that we can talk about a specific issue in incredible depth with the most senior leaders in the company. And that gets us immediate calibration. It gets us immediate high judgment decisions, and it makes sure that we're all pulling together. The other conversation that we have with him is around our metrics. It's business updates. And we don't share with him all the many thousands of metric data points that we have, but we summarize them and we list out the key ones, and we show how well we're doing, how well the service teams are doing. The last thing that I would say there, and this is absolutely something that was established by Andy, and it's rolled down throughout his leadership, we do not live in a culture of fear. The work we do in security is incredibly important. We take that responsibility very seriously, but I'm not worried about my job. It's not a revolving door. We're not perfect. Our recommendations are not always the right recommendations. We have misjudged risks. We're humans. And over the course of a decade, of course, you're not going to bat 1,000. And we know that through the trust that we've earned, and the leadership principle is our right a lot, not our right all the time. We have earned trust, we have delivered results, and we know that because we're acting on good faith, we're acting out of customer obsession, that we get to be ourselves, we get to speak up, we get to hold our opinions. Disagree and commit is another leadership principle. And I love disagree and commit. It's one of my favorite leadership principles. It dovetails really well with my personality. But if you read the text under disagree and commit, it says leaders are obligated to disagree. It's not that you can or you have the option to. If you're not on board, you have to speak up. Right. And we're all the richer for all of the diverse perspectives that you get. And that's why and commit is important, because once we've had the discussion, you have to get on board. You don't go along grudgingly, you get on board. And so because of this relationship that we have and the tone set by Andy and now by Adam, we know that our jobs are secure. We know that we can hold an iconoclast position if we think that's the right thing to do and have the conversation.
Eric, thank you so much for your time today. Before we go, any closing thoughts?
My title is engineer, and my day job is actually quite technical. I like getting into the bits and bytes. But if you look at the talks that I've given over the past few years at reInvent or Reinforce, they've all been about people and about culture. And that's because I've found that that's really the most important thing that I can work on. If you attract the right people, if you give them the right skills and you don't build the right culture around them, then you're not going to be able to retain them. You're not going to be able to build the right mechanisms and the right tooling to deliver the right business outcomes. And so for any of our customers out there that are watching, that culture of security, of growing and of thinking about this as enabling the business and of helping the service teams, I think is the single biggest needle mover that we've discovered.
Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure, Clark. Thank you for having me.